Vicky Jaggers was born in Tilbury, Essex, the youngest of 4 siblings. She remembers her childhood fondly.
It was just normal, 2 brothers and a sister, and I had Budgie, and, my dad used to go work.
Vicky idolises her father, Len.
Always happy, always joking.
Len said, I want a little girl. And he got a little girl. That's actually why Vicky's called Victoria, because he was victorious.
Vicky forms a special bond with half-brother David, Avril's son from a previous relationship.
And he just used to cuddle her all the time, kiss her. He loved her to pieces. Any sweets he'd try and give her and things like that, he was good with her. And he was a happy kid, always giggling and pulling faces.
The family spent happy times together on holidays across the southeast of England.
He's my brother. I trusted him more than I trusted anyone else.
Kept his eye on her, and at school he wouldn't let anybody bully her or anything.
Just that family thing where you all protect each other.
But protective older brother David starts showing a darker side to his personality.
He'd have fights at school because he'd lose his temper. He hurt one lad. David had hit him, and he'd got a black eye and a split lip and that.
As he grows older, David starts getting involved in criminal activity.
Started getting into trouble in his teenage years. Always fighting, like 15 sort of onwards.
Cars were his thing. He loved driving. Him and his mates actually stole a car that had been left in a car park, and we had the police there then because they'd recognised him, because everybody recognised him because he was so well-mannered.
At the age of 13, David asks his mum to buy him an air rifle so he can shoot at animals with his friends.
But he'd only had it about a fortnight, and we had a policeman at the door. Apparently him and his friend had gone down the alley and they were firing through the bushes. It was right near the railway line, and the fella that did the gates on the railway line, they nearly shot him.
Avril and Len realise something needs to be done about their delinquent son. They need a fresh start for the family. So they move away and become temporary pub managers, travelling from pub to pub every few weeks with 17-year-old David and 12-year-old Vicky in tow.
It was quite, I suppose, lively sort of atmosphere because, like, a lot of them were country pubs. Yeah, they were happy memories.
Although the pub lifestyle suits Avril and Len, it is beginning to have consequences for their children. Forensic psychologist Dr. Kerry Nixon works with Merseyside Police profiling serious violent offenders. She's been analysing Jaggers' behaviour.
We know from looking at Jaggers' past that he had difficulties in childhood. The family didn't settle in one place very long. So in terms of building up long-standing relationships, there doesn't seem to be any security in Jaggers' life. We see a lot of delinquent behaviour, which again, from the literature we know is a risk factor. He's got previous convictions for delinquent behaviour, antisocial traits. It's a risk factor for violent behaviour, but also for sex offences.
Vicky and David actually used to spend a lot of time downstairs with us.
I was always with older people in the pubs and things like that as well. That's when all my schooling went out the window.
Psychologist Emma Kenny works with victims of family abuse in her clinics and recognises the impact this has.
Vicky would not have been able to form secure, supportive attachments with peers. She wouldn't have been able to have reliances on teachers and educators who could have helped her when tragedy struck. And in fact, what that would have done was have built a reliance on her brother's relationship with her.
Jaggers is becoming a ticking time bomb. Already a danger to the public, he now sets his sights on those closest to him. He was about to commit one of the sickest crimes imaginable.
Someone come into the room, and then I felt the bed. I felt someone get into the bed.
At the time, what did you think was happening?
I don't know, I was too scared.
She said, I'm never going back in that room.
That's her brother. Right. These are the people that you trust the most in your life. That trust had been destroyed.
The childhood of 12-year-old Vicky Jaggers is about to be destroyed by the one person she trusts the most, her older brother David. Vicky remembers the pub she was living in at the time.
I know it was an old coach inn, a little bit spooky because where it was old it used to creak and you had all the old wooden floorboards. I went to bed early, I think it was about 9 because everyone was still downstairs.
As Vicky sleeps upstairs, her brother David returns home.
I remember waking up, I think, when the door opened. Would have been about 10:30. Someone come into the room. Normally my mum and dad check on me, so I just went back to sleep.
But it's not Vicky's parents entering the room that night. It's her brother David.
And then I felt someone get into the bed. And then he did what he did. Left. And then I just laid there crying all night. I could tell it was him because certain smells, different aftershaves and all that sort of thing, I knew it was him. I was scared, cried most of the night.
Detective Sergeant Tracy Wheeler has worked in the Child Protection Unit at Essex Police for more than 10 years, dealing directly with family abuse cases.
He would have been 17 at the time. He had sex with her without a word. Didn't threaten her, didn't say anything to her, and consequently she didn't say anything back. And I can't imagine how frightened you have to be to not move a muscle or say anything or not cry out in any way.
He took away her childhood in that instant, and for that it's unforgivable.
But the question for Dr. Kerry Nixon is, how did David Jaggers go from stealing cars to committing incest on his 12-year-old sister?
From what we can see from how Jaggers raped Vicky, and from what we know from research in how young people sexually abuse, it would suggest that Jaggers has actually had some kind of early initiation of sex. Now, this could be through pornography, it could be from seeing sex in the household, but it certainly suggests the manner in which he raped Vicky, how he went about it, the raping her from behind, the not saying anything, the control. It all suggests that this is something that he has witnessed in his background.
The next morning, Vicky goes down to breakfast with her family.
I couldn't sleep at all that night, and the next morning I did actually have to go into the kitchen, and he was in there, and he was just normal. Everyone was just getting on with life as normal.
Whilst this has changed her life, to everybody else's eyes, she's just getting up and walking in the kitchen and having a breakfast. And that normality shifts you. It makes you think, hang on, did this happen? Has this happened? Am I imagining this? What would I say if I needed to talk about it?
I was confused. I didn't know whether it was normal or anything. Being in the pubs, moving around, I didn't spend a lot of time with any friends, so I didn't know what their families were like. So, yeah, I just thought it was normal.
She loved her family. She loved her mum. She adored her father. The idea of speaking words that would transform that experience forever was just too overwhelming for her. And that's the tragedy with family abuse.
David, the protective older brother she trusted, has become her abuser.
He's got such an evil look sometimes. He's only got to look at you and you just see an evil streak. My whole view of him changed.
Almost like in non-verbal communication, a message is given. You won't talk. She's scared of him. He's not who she believed he was. If he's capable of raping her, what else is he capable of?
The fact that he managed to control Vicky, not to say anything, gave him an enhanced sense of confidence. He got away with it, and he then could go on and get away with further crimes.
David Jaggers isn't finished with his sister Vicky.
I went home that night after school. The pub opened as normal. Had dinner. I went to bed. Didn't really sleep much. And he come in again. And the same happened again that night. He got in my bed and he raped me for a second time.
On the third consecutive night, David rapes his sister Vicky again.
I just know after the third night I didn't like it and I made up an excuse because the pub was haunted. That the ghost was in my room and I wasn't sleeping in there anymore. And I used to sleep on my mum and dad's floor in their bedroom.
When she was talking, like saying there was a ghost there, she seemed to be absolutely terrified, so obviously we didn't force her to go back into the bedroom.
This is the last time David rapes Vicky, but her worst fears become reality.
I was 12 and I just found out I was carrying my brother's baby, and I was terrified. I was really worried about him finding out. Didn't know whether he was going to hurt me or anything like that, so yeah, I was scared, very scared.
When David finds out Vicky is pregnant, he moves out of the family home. But Avril still has no idea her beloved son is the father.
We asked her who it was, and she said a boy at school. And she said that it had happened in a field at the back of the school.
As Vicky is underage, the police get involved, and she makes up another story to hide her dark secret.
She told them that it was someone who I was seeing on a caravan park, whose baby it was, who was underage as well. So there was no further action. There was never a point that I even thought of telling the truth.
The police don't believe Vicky's story and ask Avril if the father could be a family member.
They asked me if I thought it could be Len, and I said, no, I'm sorry, no way. Just absolutely no way. And then they said, well, what about David? And I said, to be honest, I really don't know. I just didn't know.
But Vicky can't bring herself to tell the truth. A few months later, at the age of 13, Vicky gives birth to Kirsty.
There was no hate, no nothing, it was just love. I don't look at her and think David's daughter. I look at her and think my daughter.
Avril agrees to bring up Kirsty, and Vicky goes to boarding school to continue her studies. Over the next 3 years, David Jaggers keeps a low profile, but he remains a threat to women.
We know from sex offenders that the average age of first offence for a sex offender is about 23. And many sex offenders have had previous offences that they have not been caught for. So therefore, they go on to offend more and more. And the more that they get away with it, they learn from that behaviour. They learn how to offend. They learn how to control, how to manipulate.
Having got away with the rapes on Vicky, David Jaggers begins a relationship with a single mum of 2, Helen Mitchell, whose parents live opposite Avril.
This man, called Jaggers, David Jaggers, come to visit somebody in the flats who lived underneath my sister, And he sat out there all day and right till late at night. And then my sister, like being a kind person, went out there and said to him, "You're welcome to come up." Well, my sister didn't know anything about him, what he'd done to his own sister, because she wouldn't have let him in her flat if she knew he was an evil person. So she let him in, and then he sort of done the charm on my sister, and they ended up getting together.
Even though Helen was considered an outgoing, bubbly young woman liked by lots of people, people like David can seek out people's weaknesses. And in this case, that played out in an incredibly tragic way.
Jaggers was intelligent and he was able to manipulate the people in his lives probably because of his intelligence. So he had the risk factors that made him a very violent and dangerous person, but he also had the intelligence and the glibness and the charm to be able to execute all this.
It's not long before David becomes violent towards Helen.
And then she started, like, a few black eyes here and there, and I used to say to her, "How'd you get there, Mel?" "Oh, I done that on the door," or "I fell." And then in my mind, I used to think, I know he's done that, but she used to say, no, don't be silly, of course he ain't. Sort of protecting him.
We were sitting eating dinner, and he just said straight across the table to her, "Shut your mouth. I can't eat with you with your mouth wide open. I don't want to see what you're eating in front of everybody."
The risk factors that we can see in Jaggers' behaviour towards Helen, the emotional abuse, the physical violence, combined with what's happened to Jaggers as a child, makes him a very dangerous character indeed.
Helen's two daughters, Tara and Lucy, are just 4 and 2 at the time.
I know my dad used to say he used to get a phone call to come down because he's broke Tara and Lucy's toys or nicked the money out the telly. I think he broke my mum's nose once and he come down to help her, but she always got back with him. And my dad just sort of felt like there's only so much he could do, you know.
Her family would have wanted her to confide in them. But actually, how many of us are ready to say, my relationship's going wrong? How many of us think it won't happen again? She's a classic example of a really fantastic young woman who met the wrong man.
We see in his relationship with Helen that he demeans her, he humiliates her, he controls her, he tells her what to do, he puts her down in front of people, and these are all risk factors in domestic abuse perpetration.
Sheila's concerns over Jaggers were confirmed when her sister rings her, asking for help.
And when I got there, he had this silver case, and I'll always remember as long as I live. It was a case with all different types of knives in it. And I said to him, "Before you put that knife through my sister, you'll put it through me first." He put all the knives back, put them in the case, and I said, "Helen, get your stuff, because you're coming home with me." And I took Tara, Lucy and Helen, and they come and stayed with me.
Tara remembers David Jaggers threatening her mum in front of her.
He had like a suitcase, and he opened the suitcase up, and there was like big knives, little knives, and he pulled the biggest one out and he put it up against my mum's throat, and he threatened her. That's all I really remember of that day. It was only a couple of weeks later that she was found dead.
I phoned the police and I said, "My son's just told me he's killed his girlfriend."
He took my mum away. He done it, he's evil.
After committing incest on his 12-year-old sister Vicky, David Jaggers has moved on to his next victim, his girlfriend, single mum of 2, Helen Mitchell.
All I know is she was beautiful. Just by a photograph, I couldn't remember her voice or anything like that.
Jaggers' behaviour towards Helen is spiralling out of control.
There's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's humiliation, there's threats with knives, weapon use is a known risk factor, there's humiliation, there's sexual assault. You know, the risk factors are endless in Jaggers' history. Something tips him over the edge on that day.
When Helen comes home from a night out, Jaggers is waiting up for her. They start arguing.
I can see in my head as well, my mum trying to get to a door. She's running to the door, but he's pulling her.
He strangled her. He strangled my sister with his bare hands. And at the night he killed my sister, my 2 nieces was in the house upstairs.
I was 2 years old when my mum was killed. I don't remember my mum at all. I have no memories of her.
But Helen's eldest daughter, Tara, is in the room watching.
I just remember saying to him, "Where's Mummy?" And he pointed to an armchair. She had her legs over one and her arm over another with her eyes shut, and the sheet was up to there. Right,
Floppy arms.
Yeah. And he said, "Kiss Mummy and I'll take you to Nanny's." My last 2 memories of my mum, kissing her, and she was asleep.
I think he's sick for making you kiss her.
He took my mum away. He done it. He's evil. How can you do that? And I know that sometimes you're in the heat of the moment, but there was 2 little girls in that house that night.
But Helen's daughters aren't alone. Her 14-year-old sister is also there. In another sickening act, Jaggers goes upstairs and has unlawful sex with Helen's sister. Then he takes Tara to his mum's, leaving Helen's dead body undiscovered.
I said to him, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I've killed Helen. I've taken her life."
For Dr. Kerry Nixon, David Jaggers' remorse is at odds with his violent behaviour.
But he seems incredibly mixed up. In one hand, he's controlling the victims, unbelievably. He's controlling, even to the point where he's telling the daughter to kiss her mother. He's showing no remorse after the rape of Vicky to his family members. They say that his behaviour isn't changing. But on another side, he breaks down.
Avril has to make a decision.
I phoned the police and I said, "My son's just told me he's killed his girlfriend." He kept saying that he'd taken the little girls' mums away.
He took a relationship that a mother and daughter have, which I've never had.
Helen's death at the hands of David also has a huge impact on Vicky.
I felt guilty, scared, because that could have been me. Guilty because I should have said something sooner. He could have hurt Kirsty, he could have hurt me. So yeah, I made the decision to never say anything.
David is arrested by police and charged with the murder of Helen. In February 1990, 20-year-old David Jaggers pleads guilty to manslaughter and is sentenced to 6 years in prison. He's also convicted of unlawful sex with a girl and is given 6 months to run concurrently. But Helen's daughters will grow up never knowing their mum.
He took my mum away. And that's the most important thing in your life, really. Everyone's got a mum.
Yeah, but it's different, because if your mum dies of, like, cancer or something like that,
You've got time to...
You can learn to deal with it. But when someone's took your mum away, it's a bit harder. Because it weren't her time then.
With David Jaggers behind bars for the killing of Helen Mitchell, Vicky feels safe enough to return home from boarding school and starts building her relationship with her daughter Kirsty.
She's always known that Vicky is her mum. I mean, we've never hidden it. It's always been there. Although, like, from then, she called me mum, she called Len dad, she called Vicky.
But this happy time was short-lived for the family. Vicky's beloved dad is diagnosed with terminal cancer, and David Jaggers is released early, having served just 4 years for killing Helen. David is back in Vicky's life, and the consequences are terrifying.
David come in one day and had a go at me, saying that I didn't care about my dad. And I actually turned around to him and said, "Why do you care? He's not even your dad." And he actually strangled me and turned me blue. That reinforced what he did to his girlfriend, and why I was so scared. That just put it in place. Like, I'm definitely never saying anything.
After the attack, Vicky cuts David out of her life and moves on, having 4 more children. She gets married to Kelly, and over the next 10 years has virtually no contact with her brother. But the threat posed by David to her and her family is never far away. 18 years after he raped his sister, David Jaggers is staying at his mum Avril's house. And Vicky's teenage daughters are also there, visiting their grandmother.
I don't think Vicky realised that he'd been spending time at mine. His computer and everything was there because he'd lost his flat. And this particular day I got up and he was on the computer. And he obviously had been there all night. Vicky's girls were upstairs and they were all playing around, laughing and joking. And David got up and went and shouted at them. So they ran off home.
I was going absolutely mad, stomping up the road. I just know I wanted my girls out of there.
Get down here!
Because she was going up to obviously sort out what was going on, but she was going nuts at me, and I was turning round to her and I was saying, calm down, calm down. This is your brother. He's what are you worried about? So he's turned around and had a go at one of them. I was defending him.
It's totally out of context. It doesn't make sense. And to Kelly, her partner, this absolutely doesn't make sense. But he knows, because he knows her, he loves this woman, and he recognises there has got to be something more deep. There has got to be.
She was at the bottom of the stairs, screaming that he was there all night with her girls. And she weren't going to have that. He weren't going to do it again. David was standing near the window and could hear a load of shouting downstairs. And David just turned round and he said, everybody's going to hate me now. And I went, why? Don't be daft. Love you. And he said, no. Everybody's going to make me. And I said, well, why? And he said, they just are, Mum. I know they are.
Vicky had challenged him, and he knew that the rape of Vicky was about to come out. So suddenly, all the things that he was controlling in his life and had control over were starting to fall down around him.
He realised everything was going to come out, and he went off.
With David on the run, a confused Kelly takes Vicky home.
Taking her home and opening that communication, starting to talk to her about what he's just seen, his concerns, recognising that there has to be something more opens the opportunity for Vicky to talk. And finally, in her loving, supportive relationship, with the recognition that David is dangerous and could harm her children, she does the ultimate courageous thing. She tells the truth.
It was so harrowing. It was unbelievable. She just burst into tears, and I sort of, what's the matter? Why all the tears? And that's when she just blurted. That's the only word I can use. Blurted out. Everything.
It just all sort of just spilled out. Everything it all come out at once. And it was like a relief to actually finally tell someone.
She was saying, it's him, he did this. And I remember saying who, and she said, David's the one. I said, David's the one what? David's her dad, David's her dad. I said, what are you on about? And that's when she said David was the one who raped me when I was 12. And I was just gobsmacked. I didn't know what to do. I just literally just put my arm around her and said, right, so no, it'll be all right. We're all right. I know what's going on. So no, we can sort this. All right, and she was just a wreck. You're talking the person that, one of the people that she should most trust in the world has let her down in that way.
In that moment, everything changes. That's when she reclaims her power. And Kelly is able to help her start the process of bringing David to justice.
Kelly must now break the news to Vicky's mother, Avril.
He said, I've got something to tell you, and Vicky is really, really frightened. She's really, really worried. And I said, why, what's the matter with her? You know, I thought there was something wrong. And he said, I've got to tell you, David is Kirsty's dad. And it didn't seem surprising. It was as if in somewhere I knew. And all I could think about was, is Vicky okay? You know, she must be in a dreadful state if she said it now after all this time.
Her words were, I need her to know that I do believe. Right, and that is the first thing she wanted to do, was to make sure that her daughter knew that she believed her.
Granny called me down and she was like, you could tell she'd been crying, her eyes were all red and that, and she was like shaking a little bit. And they sat me down and they told me.
She just told us that David, your daddy, raped her. And all she was worried actually was Vicky. Just, is she all right? And I said, I don't know.
I just didn't know what to do. I didn't even start crying at first. It just didn't register, like it couldn't be true. I just didn't know if I was dreaming, if it was real or what.
We went to Vicky's and as soon as I walked in the door, I just grabbed hold of her and cuddled her, and she cried, and we both cried actually. And I just kept saying to her, I'm sorry.
Kirsty gave me a big cuddle. We sat there crying for hours.
She just gave me a hug and said sorry, but I didn't see why she had to be sorry. It wasn't her fault. Like.
This is the saddest part of this journey, because all of those fears that she had, that she'd be rejected, that people wouldn't believe her, that she would lose her family, don't happen. And in fact, Avril and Kirsty just want to go and find her and hold her. And that's exactly what happens. And in a way, that's one of the hardest things that abuse survivors have to realise, that very often the people that they believe they will lose actually become their greatest support.
But Vicky's ordeal was far from over. She has to make a statement to the police about the rapes.
And then my nightie went up. And then I felt him.
In one final desperate act, Jaggers kidnaps another woman and holds her hostage for 3 days.
From my experience of David Jaggers, he's a very damaged individual. What damaged him or who damaged him, I don't know.
The police launch a manhunt, but will they find him in time? It's December 2004, and convicted killer and rapist David Jaggers is a wanted man. Realising his sister is about to go to the police, Jaggers kidnaps a young woman in Essex and is holding her against her will.
Jaggers is very much what I term a violent control individual. High levels of aggression, high levels of violence, but also high levels of controlling behaviour to the women in his life particularly. So this is just another extension of his violence and his control against women.
Meanwhile, Vicky is about to be interviewed by police.
Vicky has carried a secret with her for 18 years. 18 years. She's tried to avoid the feelings, put it to the back of her mind, get on with her life, and then all of a sudden, the secret is out. And the secret has consequences. And in this case, she needs to tell the police, and a DNA test needs to be carried out on Kirsty to confirm what she's saying. And even though everybody believes her, the process has to occur. And that process involves giving statements and talking about it for only the second time in her life, and to strangers. This is ultimately terrifying for anybody who's been through an abuse cycle.
When I first interviewed her, the release with the catharsis was unbelievable. She just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And when I first met her, it was like walking into a room with a 12-year-old girl again. She became that little girl that had happened to all those years ago.
And then my nightie went up. And then I felt him.
She knew instantly that it was David. She knew his smell. She knew his aftershave or his cologne that he always wore. And he had long hair at the time, and that she felt his long hair on her back. She said it was pitch black. She had blackout curtains and there was absolutely nothing she could see, but she knew instinctively and by the build of the body that it was her brother.
Where on your body did he touch you? On my legs. To slide my nightie up.
Okay.
And then on my arms. Felt like he was holding me down on my side.
At the time, what did you think was happening?
I don't know, I was too scared.
Did you know about sex at that age?
Not properly. And then he stopped. And then he just got out and walked out.
And she didn't say anything to anybody. Nothing was said the next day. And the next night, exactly the same thing happened again. And the next night, exactly the same thing happened again. She got very upset, and we had to stop at times. I think she went out a couple of times for a cigarette, and she needed to make sure that Kelly was there, and Kelly was nearby. He wasn't in the room for the interview, he's in the next room, but he saw everything and heard everything that she said, but she needed him nearby in order to have the strength to speak to us.
How did you feel afterwards? Scared, dirty, I don't know.
Video statements were hard, but it was seeing her in that chair again, explaining exactly what she had to explain to me, but having to go into great detail.
I felt him pushing his penis between my legs.
Was that the first time you'd had sex with anybody?
Yeah.
Was there any bleeding at all?
Not that I know of. Okay. I don't remember any.
That is the hardest thing I've ever been through, because this is the woman that I love. She didn't deserve that, and it wasn't fair.
David Jaggers releases his victim, then calls a friend, saying he is evil and deserves to die. Armed police close in on Jaggers.
I was in the process of the investigation in relation to the incest, and I was made aware that David Jaggers had been arrested after a siege involving what was thought to be a replica or imitation handgun.
Jaggers is transferred to the police station, where he meets Tracy Wheeler.
I interviewed David Jaggers with a colleague of mine over 5 or 6 tapes, and if you think a tape is 45 minutes long, that's a long time to be interviewing somebody. He knew exactly why he was arrested, he knew exactly what he was going to be questioned about, and chose to say no comment all the way through the interview.
But this was the end for Jaggers. DNA tests confirm he's Kirsty's father.
It was at that time then he changed his plea to guilty, and then obviously was convicted and sentenced.
In May 2005, David Jaggers is convicted of kidnap, rape, making threats to kill, use of an imitation firearm, and finally 3 counts of incest, the rapes of his sister Vicky 18 years earlier. He is given an 11-year determinant sentence to run alongside a life sentence with a minimum tariff of 6 years.
We know that Judge, when sentencing Jaggers to life imprisonment, said that he had a very disturbed childhood. That helps me understand what led to the sequence of these events. This individual has been created. You know, he has got serious issues from childhood.
From my experience of David Jaggers, he's a very damaged individual. What damaged him or who damaged him, I don't know. But something must have happened to him, or he must be ill to have behaved in the way that he did.
Despite David Jaggers' despicable crimes, the families and the victims left behind have remained strong.
If we all destroy ourselves, he's going to love that sitting in prison. He's won, isn't he? And it ain't about who's winning in a game. So we have to be strong for each other. You ain't got no choice in life. You've either got to crack up or carry on.
I think we were the only sisters that didn't actually argue, weren't they?
My kids don't stop.
Yeah, I say
It's
that
not
to them
normal.
as well.
It's not
Me and
normal.
my sister
Me and
never
mum.
used to say the same thing.
They were the kids in that situation. They have grown up knowing that the only other shared experience, the only other person who can truly relate to that, the only person who can comfort them in those moments where they haven't got a Mother's Day card prepared, they don't have a celebration of a birthday, they don't have somebody to comfort them in the way that only a mother can. They have each other and they can comfort one another. And that, in a way, is where David loses his power, because these children became women who have a strong, lifelong bond that a mother would be proud of.
Being everything. Yeah. I love his faces. Yeah. And you.
He's made me a stronger person. Ruined the first part of my life, but made me a stronger person in adult life.
Everything had been on hold. It's as if life had been on hold. And the relief, and Vicky actually got a night's sleep. When everything's over, you realise, and you realise why, and it puts everything into place. So you're able to move on, because that jigsaw's now complete. And now we're on a new one, and it doesn't involve him.
What almost destroyed Vicky now gives her the strength to carry on. Her family.
My family's everything to me. I wouldn't be here without them. I really truly believe that if I hadn't have had my kids, I wouldn't be here today. He would have actually won.